Dr. Arianne here from the Movement Paradigm. Did you ever wonder what the science of stress actually is and how exactly does it affect your body? Before we jump in, please make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel, Arianne Missimer, and don't forget to hit that alert button so you stay tuned for new content every single week. So let's start by defining stress. So stress is a state in which our homeostasis, our sense of internal balance, is threatened or perceived to be threatened. So I'd like to give the example of running from a tiger. So that would be considered, I think you would all agree, an actual threat. But let's say that we have a red alert button that pops up on our phone every 10 minutes with a notification. Although both of those are very different, they can both cause the same physiological reaction in the body. Now, the term stress was coined by a Hungarian endocrinologist, Hans Selye, in 1936. Now, he also coined the general adaptation syndrome to stress. So there's 3 stages in this. So the first stage is the alarm stage. So this is where our nervous system, specifically our sympathetic nervous system, becomes activated and we are on alert. This is also when our HpA, our hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, is also activated, which we will talk about in just a second. And we are prepared to defend ourselves or potentially run from threat. The second stage is resistance. So this is when the stressor stays around a little longer than it should, and our body continues to resist and to fight throughout this period. The third stage is fatigue. So this is when we have prolonged stress and our body loses the ability to manage effectively other stressors that may be present. So let's talk about what happens to the brain when we are under stress. So first, our amygdala is where we process emotions in our brain. So it's a cluster of cell bodies in the temporal lobe. It's going to perceive an actual threat or a perceived threat. When that happens, it's going to signal to the hypothalamus to release corticotropic releasing hormone. That in turn is going to signal the pituitary gland to then also release adrenocorticotropin hormone. Then that is signaling to the adrenal glands, which sit right on top of the kidney, to then release cortisol. So you can see we are having a cascade of stress hormones that are released upon chronic activation or acute activation of stress. So when the sympathetic nervous system is turned on, we are going to increase heart rate, increase blood pressure, because all of the blood is rushing to our extremities. If we had to flee from a tiger, then we are therefore slowing digestion, and cortisol is flooding the system. So that in turn can lead to things like brain fog, really poor memory and learning and attention, which of course therefore decreases the ability to be mindful. So we spoke about the pituitary gland. So this is considered the master gland in the body, and it regulates your temperature, your thyroid activity, urine production. So this explains when you have to go to the bathroom frequently when you are stressed. In addition to signaling to the adrenal gland to release cortisol, the pituitary gland also releases thyroid stimulating hormone, which signals to the thyroid to produce thyroxine. Thyroxine is going to increase metabolic activity, increase heart rate, increase blood pressure, blood sugar, so everything that's needed for a quick burst of energy. When this happens, however, it's going to use up the B vitamins very quickly and excrete magnesium. So now let's talk about the heart. So obviously with constricted blood vessels, this is going to make it much harder for the heart to pump blood. And also in addition to the high cortisol and high levels of thyroxine, that is also going to lead to plaque buildup over this time. And as cortisol is released into the bloodstream, fatty acids are released, which means that there's going to be a higher proportion of LDL, so we refer to that as our bad cholesterol, in the bloodstream. So this can really impact, of course, the risk of heart disease. So now let's talk about the adrenals. So when the hypothalamus signals the adrenal gland to release adrenaline and noradrenaline, this is going to once again increase our heart rate and our blood pressure and help us with blood flow so that we are able to flee. However, when this begins to happen on a regular basis, when this chronic stress and activation of this HpA axis is activated, then you end up feeling lethargic but wired. So we call that tired but wired. And some of you may have experienced that before. This can in turn lead to physical exhaustion, brain fog, immune suppression, skin issues, anxiety, depression. It can lead to a whole host of issues from this chronic activation of This can lead to a whole host of issues, including physical exhaustion, feeling brain fog, depression, immune suppression is a big one, skin issues. All of these things can be factors of this chronic HpA axis activation. So now let's talk about the stomach and intestines. So when the digestive system is slowed down immensely from the activation of the sympathetic nervous system and the thyroid, it can either create an overproduction of digestive acids or an underproduction. So both can cause significant issues. So on one end, we could experience bloating and just abdominal discomfort. On another end, we might experience acid reflux, which I will link to another video, which can also cause a whole host of issues. Either way, when you are having these issues, you can create inflammation in the intestine, and therefore that is going to lead to a decrease in the ability to absorb nutrients. So because of that, it can lead to many different immune issues, gut issues, and just overall health concerns. Now let's talk about body fat. So essentially, when cortisol is released into the bloodstream, especially on a regular basis, it is going to affect body fat in two specific ways. One is it really ramps up your desire for quick energy. So therefore, that is typically going to be your quick enriched carbohydrates as well as sugar. And then two is that cortisol, once again, is contributing, and then cortisol is also contributing to a release of glucose into the bloodstream. So because of that, it is, number two is cortisol is contributing to a release of glucose into the bloodstream. So if that is not burned off, guess where that's stored? As body fat. So not only are you likely craving and overeating sugary and carbohydrate-rich foods, but you are also most likely storing that as additional body fat. So it can really contribute to, once again, a lot of health issues and weight issues as well. So last but definitely not least is the reproductive system. So progesterone is one of the key hormones that is responsible for fertility, for keeping the lining of the uterus healthy, for libido. So it's also one of the key ingredients for cortisol. So when we have chronic stress, it is going to put more demand on the adrenal glands to produce cortisol, which means that there is less progesterone. So that means that you can have low libido, you can have fertility issues, and other hormonal type issues. So as you can see, stress, especially chronic stress, is going to negatively impact your nervous system, your immune system, as well as your hormonal system. So it is really, really important to figure out ways that you can learn how to manage your stress and really make sure that you are bringing yourself back into that state of homeostasis, that state of internal balance. So how can we do that? There are lots of ways, and I will include lots of links to different videos, but let's start with the first and foremost, which is sleep, making sure that you are sleeping at least 7 hours minimum a night, and that is high quality restful sleep. That means shutting down the blue lights, that means really preparing your body for rest. because if you're not getting enough sleep, it's going to be really hard to physically and mentally and emotionally meet the demands of what you have to do every day. The second is going to be movement. So movement, as I always say, is a gift. And moving is a way to express emotions. It's a way to express ourselves as humans. We crave movement. So making sure that you're building it into your routine, not necessarily fitting it into your schedule. And it does not necessarily need to be high intensity training. It could just be movement. It could be going for a walk. It could be doing some things on the ground. It could be playing with your kids. So there's so many ways to include movement in your life. Meditation and mindfulness. So of course, it would be always beneficial to explore a formal meditation practice, but you can also have so many ways that you can include informal practices during your day. So thinking about how you can do mindful listening, practice mindful listening with your friends, with your family, with your coworkers, actually being attentive to everything that they're saying. You could practice mindful eating, really being present in the experience of eating. And remember that mindfulness is simply being present. It's paying attention on purpose in the present moment without judgment. And of course, nutrition, as I always talk about, we want to be thinking about anti-inflammatory foods. So making sure that it's a whole food, natural diet, making sure you're getting enough protein in your diet to have enough protein health for optimal hormone function. So there are just some basic things that you can do in your life that are so important to decreasing and managing stress. I always like to use the analogy of holding a pen. So if you hold a pen and you white knuckle it as hard as you can, then that's you holding on to that stress, feeling that tension in your whole body, versus opening your hand and changing the way that you perceive the stress, seeing the situation differently. And if you can think of those things in your daily life, you can really make a huge impact on how you perceive stress and how you can become more resilient to everything that you're doing and as it relates to life's challenges. Hopefully this was helpful, and if it was, please feel free to share this with friends and family, and of course don't forget to like and hit a comment below. And as always, thank you so much for your support. If you would like, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Arianne, and don't forget to hit that alert button to stay tuned for new content every single week.